Paradise community. This is Glen, and if you have not yet met me, I am one of the new managers here. I was here for a while, so if my face looks familiar, that's why. If you're unfamiliar, hello. I'm one of the new managers here, and I had the cool opportunity this morning to talk with a friend of the store and colleague of mine named Tony Fanchi. Tony is a game designer at Fantasy Flight Games and is one of the designers of the upcoming hidden role game Unfathomable, which takes place in the Arkham Horror Universe and is a successor, a sequel, is a new sort of relook at the old Battlestar Galactica game. So Battlestar Galactica, an incredibly sort of hallmark modern board game, and so it's coming back in this new form in Unfathomable. So I had the opportunity today to talk with Tony a little bit about that, and you can now see my interview. So good morning, Tony. With me this morning is Tony Fanchi. And Tony, if I may, what is your actual official title at Fantasy Flight Games?
I am a game designer with FFG.
Okay, so it is not a surprise we are going to be talking about Unfathomable today. Unfathomable. That's going to be a fun word to say throughout this thing.
Or unpronounceable, if you will.
Yeah, unpronounceable. That should be the first expansion. Tell me a little bit about your job at Fantasy Flight, and tell me a little bit more about sort of what you do sort of on a given ongoing basis.
So I'm a game designer, and so I am in charge of making the awesome board games you see. I'm on the board game side, whereas we have a card game side as well, who do our living card games and the like. But I basically come up with mechanics for games, test them out, make sure everything's working. I write the rule books for the games that I'm working on. I test other designers' games, and a lot of game playing. It's a lot of fun, but it does have its work as well.
Yeah, for sure. You're probably, I think probably everybody just assumes that you just sort of like roll dice all day long or something. But yeah, it also sounds like a lot of work as well. So tell me a little bit about, we are obviously talking again about Unfathomable. Tell me a little bit about what the process is like for a game like that to get made. Where does it start conceptually? Where does it start? How does it end up in your lap? Tell me a little bit more about that.
So in the case of Unfathomable, the impetus for it came from our former head of studio, Andrew Navarro, back in 2019.
Yep.
I was available. I was just coming off my previous project at that time, and so I was the next designer up on the schedule to take a lead on a game design. And so I talked with Andrew and then Chris Gerber, our current studio head, about the vision for the game, which was basically, how can we take this beloved game, Battlestar Galactica, that has been long out of print and is very hard to find, and how can we recreate it for a new generation of fans? And the idea of putting it in the Arkham Horror Universe was for a number of reasons, primarily because we no longer have the Battlestar Galactica license.
Right.
The TV show is awesome, but it's also like a decade old, and so it's not really very present in the current zeitgeist.
Right.
And of the IPs that we have within the studio, there were a couple of options. We could have gone with our own space drama with Twilight Imperium.
Sure.
But we felt that putting it in the Arkham Horror Universe had the right tone that we were looking for. The feeling of suspense and suspicion and treachery that really grabs the feeling of the original game and moves it into a new genre that I think will be more accessible for people who perhaps weren't able to get into the previous one.
Okay.
Just sitting down and telling players that you're humans, you're passengers on this boat, and these monsters are attacking, and some of you are in league with the monsters, is a very easy idea to get across.
Yeah. So talking a little bit about talking just you briefly you mentioned Battlestar Galactica. Obviously, Battlestar Galactica exists sort of in the pantheon of modern board gaming as, I think probably one of the most celebrated, most sort of exciting. It's definitely a sort of a touchstone as far as hidden role games are concerned. Tell me a little bit about what that was like, and then tell me a little bit about with your own personal experiences with either Battlestar Galactica or hidden role in general, as far as that goes.
So I had been aware of Battlestar Galactica for a long time, but I'd never had the chance to actually sit down and play it because it's such a long game,
Right.
Can be, and requires a specific player count that I don't generally have time for, like in my nightly gaming groups. But when the project started, I sat down and I made sure to play. We played multiple games of BSG. We did the base game only. We put in all the expansions at one point, just to get a taste of what the game was, what was central to the game. And we spent a lot of time talking between myself, Nate French, our head game designer, Corey Knitska, the original designer of BSG, kind of getting down to the core of what that game did and what made Battlestar Galactica such a success, so that I could take those elements and transport them into the new game. And then from there, I made a lot of changes to kind of fit the new theme with the mechanics of the old game in a way that made sense thematically, and also kind of sanded off some of the rough edges of the original design.
Yeah, for sure. As far as, so obviously, I think you and I have talked. I think you've used the term spiritual sequel, or sort of maybe not successor, but definitely heavily influenced. And I think the BGG term would be reimplemented by. Is sort of true of Unfathomable as far as Battlestar Galactica is concerned. What do you feel like comes through for fans of Battlestar Galactica? And there are many, obviously a lot of people who are very excited about that game, and rightly so. What do you feel like comes through really strongly about the original? For people who've never played before, what do you feel like is a really strong, or really sort of mechanical tone that the game sort of has to it?
So I think the thing that made Battlestar Galactica special, and that I tried to capture in Unfathomable, is that it's a long form game. It's not a short game like a lot of modern day hidden role games are very short, like half an hour or less. The great thing about BSG and now Unfathomable is that it's a longer game. It's going to take you 2 to 4 hours, I'd say, to once everybody knows what they're doing. But it lets you build that trust and that bond with your fellow players at the table, so that the moment that you turn on them and stab them in the back really makes a great impact on them, because they thought they could trust you the whole time. They thought your friend over here was the traitor, but when it turns out that you are, that is just a great moment in the game, and that's going to leave you talking about that game session for weeks to come.
Yeah, and maybe for the rest of your life if it ends a few friendships.
Yeah.
We'll talk later about whether or not you're comfortable with ending as many friendships as you may be soon. But in terms of Unfathomable, obviously you'd mentioned it exists in the Arkham Horror Universe. What do you feel like is enhanced by having it be in the sort of in that sort of Lovecraftian horror, sort of gothic horror universe that Arkham Horror has?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, it's really the tone of the setting that I think is so great for the game. The feeling of unease and worry about what's around the next corner and who might be a hidden deep one in your midst. I think really catches the feeling that we want the game to express. For fans of our past Arkham horror games,
Right.
I think there's a lot in here that's going to help even expand on our Arkham universe, because this game is set a decade before our main run Arkham games.
Okay.
And so it introduces 10 completely new characters
Okay.
into the genre, with all new backstories and personalities that I think will be very exciting for Arkham veterans to learn and get to know.
That's great. Do you mind speaking really quickly just to like the relationship that the humans have to the deep ones and vice versa, or even sort of what the boat situation is? Because it takes
Sure.
place on a boat, right?
Yes. So, in a nutshell, for those who aren't familiar with what the game is set on the steamship Atlantica in the year 1913 as it's crossing the Atlantic Ocean
Okay.
to the United States. And in the course of its journey, these fish human hybrid people start attacking the boat, including their leaders, the gigantic Mother Hydra and Father Dagon, begin assaulting the boat. And little do the people on the boat know that some of their number are actually Deep One human hybrids who are undercover working on behalf of the Deep Ones.
Cool. That's cool. That's really fun. Lovely. Tell me a little bit about, okay, so in terms of the design process itself, were there any things that were uniquely challenging or things that you found sort of uniquely interesting along the way as you were sort of beginning the process, as you were going through the designs on this? Were there anything that you found unique or challenging in the design?
Well, certainly adapting a space opera game to a real world setting was a challenge. There's no faster than light speed when you're on a steamship in the 1913, but that proved an interesting challenge. But I feel like that is an area where uh, Unfathomable kind of gets its own feeling. It kind of separates itself a bit from its predecessor in the fact that instead of having one track that both moves the ship on its journey, but also makes all the monsters go away, those two functions have been split into two tracks: our travel track and our ritual track. So the travel track follows the course of the ship on its journey to Boston, and reaching the waypoints that you will pass in between, while the ritual track is represents a ritual being performed by some members of the crew to cast a greater banishment spell, which eliminates all of the monsters in the outside of the ship, but also has a downside to the humans because it also injures any people who are up on deck. So you have to be really careful about when that ritual goes off, because it could end up being more harm than good for the humans if it goes off at the wrong time.
Awesome. I think that's all we have time for right now. But Tony, again, I am so thankful that you would join us here at Paradise Games. I hope that you come back and we can talk about any unfinished business that we may have on the horizon as far as that goes.
I would love to do that. Thanks for having me, Glenn.